Hello everyone. As I have asked promptly 9 days ago, I was gonna have a Q&A session with the community where I will be answering the questions that you have been wanting to find out and things that I deem not too sensitive to be shared with all of you. Fortunately, as for all of the questions that I have received in that post alone, there wasn't any questions that were deemed too sensitive. Now, a quick thing of how this video is gonna go is that the responses that I give will mainly have a typed version out on the screen as well, in the very event that my voice is not clearly received in any particular scenario. So without further ado, let us begin the Q&A session. Question 1. When did I start playing Fall Guys? So I started playing Fall Guys in Legacy Season 1, and for those of you who want to even know the exact date, I managed to check through my Steam purchase history, as back in Legacy Season 1, Fall Guys wasn't made to be released on the Epic Games launcher just yet, so I had to really pay for the game, but that was a minor amount looking back at how much I enjoyed the game now. And the exact date being 13th of August in 2020. Question 2. What made me start playing Fall Guys, and how did I find out about Fall Guys? I combined these two questions together simply because of how similar in nature they are, and so essentially I found out about Fall Guys through the gaming channel Up Up Down Down, and in short, the channel focuses on professional wrestlers in the WWE playing games where they are not on the road. And back in 2020, as we kind of all knew, it was the pandemic era. So this allowed for more opportunities for people to really play games on their consoles, on their mobile phones, whatever else that might be possible. Yes, I am aware that back in 2020, Fall Guys wasn't a thing, but I wanted to make some reference to the very dark period that the world went through, and there we have it. So, watching the wrestlers play through the game itself, I started to get some interest because, like, being able to layer such a multi-stage kind of game while having players that go up against you every now and then, it's not easy to fulfill and create satisfaction for your audience. But Fall Guys managed to do just that. And as well, already back then in Fall Guys, while I was watching through the gameplay, it was already looking silly, as with the nature of the game is meant to be. Of course, I think the silliness has kind of moved on away from it as players just think about skill, winning, and for some reason, neutral jumping. But that's all about that. So, next question. What is my favorite season? So, as you guys will be seeing on the screen, I'm splitting this answer into 3 different parts. So, first part, I'll be looking at only the Legacy seasons, which is from Legacy Season 1 all the way to Legacy Season 6. Second part, only when the game went free for all, which was from SS1 to SS3. And lastly, overall, as how the game should be looked at all the way from Legacy Season 1 all the way to the decline of Unity in SS3. So from Legacy Season 1 to Legacy Season 6, my favorite season was LS4. If you want to have some quick elaboration, it was mainly the addition of Slime Scraper proving to be a towering challenge at that time, following the success of, or at least I would say success of Slime Climb, where really players found it hard to adapt against. Of course, now when we talk about Slime Climb and Slime Scraper in the current era, it is completely different and players are more adaptive to the gameplay of Fall Guys. But back in LS4, this wasn't the case. From SS1 to SS3, I will have to give it to SS2 primarily because of the existence of Treat Thieves as well as Hyperdrive Heroes. These two maps alone basically carried through the season, and yes, some of you may argue that that is when the vaulting of maps really started. To me personally, I feel that the vault was a concept that was just executed wrongly. But whether I have real thoughts on whether the vault was eventually successful, it might not have been the case. Lastly, from LS1 to SS3, aka the entire legacy of the Unity seasons, not just from LS1 to LS6 or from SS1 to SS3, but overall, before Unity died down and got replaced by Creative, I would have to give that to LS3. The reason for LS3 having the upper edge against seasons like LS4 and SS2 is mainly that LS3 was like really the first season that really the anti-cheating policy got implemented upon into the game, which was why LS1 wasn't my favorite season, because LS1 you notoriously had Cheetah's Island, which I think carried on to a little bit into LS2, but I personally did not have that much interactions with any sort of hackers and everything. But yes, I am aware that even in this current day and age, in the life of Fall Guys right now, there are still hackers still dominant. And all I have to say to this, if you choose to hack a game, you are just ruining the game for yourselves, as you will never know the satisfaction of losing and learning from them. Next question. So, what are my favorite levels from each season from LS1 to SS3 in general, and there might be something right at the end for it. Alright, in LS1, I've actually have... So for those of you who are a little bit aware of this by now, in LS1, there are 25 rounds to choose from, so it did not make this entire list that much difficult to work around, especially since like in rounds wise in LS1 you had to consider whether the team rounds affected your experience and whatever else. But out of every single round that existed in LS1, I have to give this over to Jump Showdown. Now, my least favorite round in LS1 had to go to Fruit Shoot. Like, back in LS1, when you only talk about their in-game physics and like the basic progression of the game, you wouldn't think that the goal of Fruit Shoot is to just stick to the corners and being able to avoid the fruits that are shot out of the cannons. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the initial goal at first, but as the age of the game went through, players adapted, and that is when we have it now, as players most of the time just stick to the edges where at certain variations there are big gituses, and most of the time with constant jumping. I don't think to the extent of bunny hopping, because with a against conveyor belt in your path, you can't really bunny hop. So that is what we have. In LS2, there are only 5 rounds to choose from. So my favorite round actually has to go to Wall Guys, because as much as I am aware Wall Guys currently is like broken right now, there was one thing that made Wall Guys stood out from the other levels. And the main knowledge of that is that you have to forge your path or wait for someone else to do it for you. And there is that risk and reward being involved, is that if you choose to create the path for others, will you be able to find your way back up in time before the qualification spot is taken from you? Or will you want to intentionally stay at the back and get a safe, secure qualification? That's a lot to think about, because it's all about, in a way, being a few steps ahead of your other competitors in the lobby that you are in. Now, my least favorite round in LS2, not many choices to select from once Wall Guys have been removed, as it left us with only 4 other rounds. And for LS2, it was going to be Hoopsie Legends. So Hoopsie Legends had a nice concept in development, but their execution was entirely horrible because of a few factors. Number one was that they didn't really had lots of, or to actually rephrase that, players have to kind of understand where the RNG could have been for the hoops to descend upon, and for you to snag it before your opponents do, right? And as well as knowing against the clock, and if let's say there are too many players going for a golden hoop and they are miserably failing by that point of the season. Remember, this is still before the physics change as well, and most of these rounds didn't have the physics change at all, not until quite late when Fall Guys Mobile was released. So you had the understanding of being able to switch around from potentially getting a gold hoop, which was 5 points, to instead get just only plain white hoops, which can actually still save you in time if you are lucky. However, in this current day and age, it is almost guaranteed that if you do not try and get a golden hoop, you are basically done for in the round. But LS2's least favorite round for me has to go to Hoopsie Legends. Now, LS3, there are actually 8 rounds to choose from, 2 of which are actually team rounds, and this is the first season where I introduced a little bit of a tie mechanic. So I will explain that in a short moment. But for most favorite round, we have Ski 4. Like, for most of the rounds itself, when I talk about my most favorite and least favorite, I did not really consider the background music, or as most of the gamers would know it as by BGM, basically listens to. But Ski 4 really brings that knowledge in you, that hype factor as well. And now that things also change throughout the history of the game itself, Ski 4 still remains one of the rounds that players look forward to playing. Now, my least favorite round has a tie between Penguin Pursuit and Snowball Survival. Penguin Pursuit is if you get into a team round, and Snowball Survival, I only put Snowball Survival in here because if I were to take away the 2 options of team rounds, I was only going to be left with choices that were very hard to look against when I would say the least favorite. Like, yes, snowball survival isn't that horrible because it is an excellent idea in both development and even in execution. But I think the one flaw that most players wouldn't talk about is how there are still some small textures that most players omit because, like, as most of us know, there are three variants in snowball survival when it comes to the snow, as I will call it. The safe tiles that you can walk on, there is three variations. Number one is the full snowflake. Second one is a snowflake with a hole. And last one is a snowflake with constant tiles of ice that can be broken every single alternate tile. Now that said, if you are those that always stick near the middle, or unless you are lucky enough to experience the hardest variation of snowball survival, you wouldn't be able to really figure out that there is a small little issue with the round where at certain points, if you get squashed by a snowball at the very edges of the map, you can at times fall through the tiles when the tile has already some cracks on them, as ice, as the mechanic introduced in LS3, had the characteristics of only disappearing after 3 impact touches. Or, in certain cases, as players would want to stick around on that tile, about 3 to I think 5 seconds of constant pressure on them. But that's it. We are moving on to LS4. LS4, I would say that LS4 was one of the seasons that was really done right. But let's just say that there were things that could have been improved on. LS4, we have 9 rounds in total, including the rounds that were added in the mid-season update. Considering the rounds in total, I think I have to give the most favorite round to the Slime Scraper, as it really introduced the challenge that I wasn't expecting myself when I first played through Slime Scraper, that they could have improved so much on Slime Climb. Especially with the anti-grav variation, and one variation that I think most of you players would not have experienced, because I actually have not seen this variant unless you are lucky enough to play the LTM hard mode in the early days, or even let's say in customs, you need to have a lots of players to get hard mode, right? There was one variation where it lies in the middle of the map, where it was high gravity, or easily denoted by the pink gravity section, as when you jump, you basically wouldn't get much of a height. That is high gravity. And there was this high gravity section in the middle part of the area, just right after the second low gravity section, and you are thrust right into a high gravity section. When you get to actually play the map with this much more complicated variation, you would really enjoy how hard the map truly is. And if I do recall correctly, hard mode was initially a LTM that was created by a player rather than the development team themselves. So there you have another piece of trivia, which I think I should have gotten it right. But moving on to the least favorite round in LS4, again a tie between 2 rounds. If you are including the team rounds, I have to give that to Power Trip, because I don't know what to say about Power Trip, but it's like half of the players who play Power Trip, they have zero clue what they are doing. And the other half who are in the team will have to try and carry this losing half to a victory, which obviously makes it much more complicated if you, let's say, get into a brawl, not necessarily one, of course, against a team who fully understands what is the goal of Power Trip. Which I think is also something that not many players say, right? When it comes to team rounds, it's like you are mixed with the issue with trying to understand how to figure out your team's ability and as well as uneven matchmaking, which is something that is very big when it comes to team rounds. But if we were to remove the team rounds for existence, it has to go to big shots, because big shots, let's face it, is a horrible idea overall, whether in development and in execution. Because cannons are just RNG. Nothing else to be said. Now, let's move on to Legacy Season 5. Where fortunately, the first season didn't actually include team rounds. As far as I am aware, I think LS6 subsequently didn't have one, but I have to recheck my information for that when I get to LS6. So, LS5, 7 new rounds being added. My most favorite round has to actually go to Some Fruit, because one little piece of thing that you wouldn't know, because I didn't really make myself involved in any community, as well as that point in time, there weren't really much streamers streaming this game at that point in time. But Some Fruit, even though obviously the goal is to count fruit, for quite a very long time, I've always made the mistake of counting everything in the last round. That included the stars, the bolts, for some unknown reason. That obviously confused me because I've always made that mistake. But that also adds to the charm that most players might make that mistake as well. And of course, as I age into the game, I slowly adapted it. Now, my least favorite round goes to Penguin Pool Party. I think not much needs to be said. Penguins, you are too slippery. I have no idea why the developers made you so slippery, and it only makes it harder with ping when you are playing off server. Now, for Legacy Season 6, we actually have the most favorite rounds going to Pipe Dream or Sweet Thieves. Now, I am aware that Sweet Thieves obviously only has its own mode where you won't be able to get the rounds in general, but that doesn't mean that that isn't a round released during the season. So, of course, if you're just talking about the main core shows itself, not as an LTM or anything else, I have to give them to Pipe Dream. This is because Pipe Dream has different sections, right? Where you have to navigate through that section to move on to the next. And being able to master each of the different rooms as the different sections, different rooms, however you want to call it, is how you prove your status as a excellent player compared to some of the others, where they just walk in a straight line, not adapting, and things that much less say make you a better skilled player than some of the others. Now, my least favorite round goes to Leading Light. Nothing much to say about Leading Light, but one thing, it's all random. Let's obviously not talk about the problem of the much more current versions of Leading Light, where players on the older gen consoles, which by that I mean the PS4 as well as Xbox One. I'm not too certain whether Xbox One obviously has this issue, but there I have already seen cases where on the PS4, where players, despite following the light, actually are not getting any percentage in points as they somehow loaded into a different variation of the game. Which actually obviously means one thing: desync issues with the light's actual position, as well as the player's position being recepted by the game. Now, moving on to the free-for-all seasons in SS1, SS2, SS3, then I will cap it off in general. Now, in SS1, there are actually 8 rounds introduced, even including Bean Hill Zone, which I think has since been removed as a round from the game files, unlike some of the other rounds. But the most favorite round for SS1 will go to a 3-way tie between Track Attack, Blast Ball, and Volleyball. Now, if you were to ask me to really choose a round of these 3, I will gladly give this round to Blast Ball. Now, you ask me why Blast Ball compared to the other 2? Blast Ball is really a round where you have to adapt to survive. If you do not adapt, you basically are at a disadvantage because the blast balls will blast at you from different angles. The platforms eventually drop, resulting in a smaller playing field. And I think, like, essentially, if you really did watch like games like Mario Party and everything, like Blast Ball has that similar concept. It's just that Blast Ball obviously had the added factor of blasting opponents off and not just relying on a map-based survival mistake that the players will have to make. Now that said, my least favorite round goes to Bounce Party. Yes, I am aware that Bounce Party can be gotten in team as well, but this was only much more recently added as Bounce Party was previously exclusive to solos. So there you have it, and Bounce Party, really the main issue I have with that game is body blocking. And even though now I kind of found a better strategy to qualify from Bounce Party, but that is in perhaps one of my eventual next stream ideas, where I aim to get every single round in the game, not just in solos, not just in duos or squads, but even the rounds in knockout, which meant the creative rounds that Mediatonic has made up until this point. Stay tuned for that one. Now, we shall move on to SS2. And once again, when we talk about SS2, it was really the season of being able to improve on maps that were previously released. And in that case, we have Hyperdrive Heroes. Now, Trick Thieves isn't of like say a big improvement of Sweet Thieves. The goal's the same, the gameplay mechanic is the same, but the extra horror vibe as it was released much more for Halloween was a very interesting addition to players, as it just adds so much higher levels of mystery of like how to be a candy guardian and how to be a sticky thief, as the goal of the round is to be. But Hyperdrive Heroes, this is the round where even skilled players like myself to this day can still make mistakes and get eliminated from the round itself. It just has so much challenge factors in the round where if you are not perfect in your execution, you have a good chance of being eliminated. And let's not talk about body blocking, of course. And let's face it, there is not a single player who can be perfect every single time. Because if you claim to be perfect in every single round, you would not have a single loss, or second, you are a hacker, nothing else. Because even the best players learn from losing. This is one thing that I can guarantee you. The highest crown players that perhaps whether retired from Fall Guys or still actively grind the game, they do this by constantly learning. Now, least favorite round in SS2, it goes to Pixel Painters and Frantic Factory. Now, that much said, I do not have any hatred for Pixel Painters. Pixel Painters was only ruined because of players not even understanding how the map is played. Nothing else. I am okay with the round in general, but due to the fact that it is a team-based round is where the disappointment stems from. For a solos exclusive round, or at least a round that can be found in minimally solos, you have Frantic Factory. This map is just too large, and with the coding where the buttons that appear at any one point in time is the number of qualifying players minus 1. So let's say if 7 players can qualify from Frantic Factory, what happens is that the number of buttons that will light up at any single point is 6, because 7 minus 1 that you get 6 buttons. Now we move on to SS3. In SS3 there aren't really much rounds that I can choose from, so most favorite will go to Kraken Slam because the other rounds are just very mediocre. And least favorite round goes to Blast Lentis. Now, I think this is something that you guys would most likely be interested at. My most favorite round in general and least favorite round in general. Now, this basically means I look through across all the seasons that were released from LS1 to SS3, all the things that they have done, and whether there is a decent chance of recovery if it's a course or race round back known in the days, as well as the rate of elimination if it's like a survival round. So for the most favorite round overall, I actually have the Slime Scraper making the return from my most favorite round from LS4, as it just provides the challenge but not to the extreme points of challenge as Hyperdrive Heroes, but if I were to give a close second, Hyperdrive Heroes takes that second place. Now, my least favorite round will come as a surprise to most of you, and let's see if you guys are able to guess it at any point. I will give you guys basically about 1 minute to try and guess it before I reveal my least favorite round. Alright, are you able to guess my least favorite round? Because it is definitely a shocker to most of you, seeing as to how I've basically enjoyed this round when I'm seen playing it, as well as some other factors. But my least favorite round is actually Tiptoe. That is what you call a perhaps rules of the entire century, but I am not capping. But this is really because in Tiptoe there's only few options. One, you are able to see the path ahead of you and make a straight dive for the end. Or two, follow the leaders. If you follow the leaders, you have a chance to be eliminated if you are too slow. And number one, for the first scenario, if you are going to be the one to open up the path, if you make a mistake because of a tile that you thought didn't shake within a 30-second time period, and you went on that fake tile, revealing the correct path to your enemies, you are basically eliminated. So low chance of recovery should you make a mistake, and even low chance of qualifying if you are not quick enough. These two factors combined is why Tiptoe is actually my least favorite round. And that is despite after like how many times of playing Tiptoe, I've grown to adapt to Tiptoe. Learning to read the path, memorize which tiles shake within a 30-second time frame. But I even have trouble trying to link a correct path and successfully connect them from where I currently am at certain points in the map. Now, if you guys are actually wondering why the last column has been entirely blocked off, I've included a bonus season, which is in SS4, the debut of Fall Guys Creative in general. How I felt my most favorite level and least favorite level in that list of, I believe, 20 rounds were. My most favorite round would go to Wham Bam Boom. Now, Wham Bam Boom, for those of you who may not have really played it as much or everything else, you guys have to understand this. Wham Bam Boom actually had a challenging path nearer to the end where it tests your skill timing of usage of the Boom Blaster, being able to skip ahead of the competition. Now, of course, now with the enhanced jump physics, the section has obviously been made easier. But back in SS4, do you think that there was that luxury of being able to have the increased jump physics to time things better? Definitely not so. Now, least favorite round in SS4, it goes to the meme level of Square Up. Why Square Up is the least favorite round? Again, it kind of falls into the same situation as Tiptoe, right? But unlike Tiptoe, where the round is basically short, the issue about Square Up that one is too long, two, lack of sufficient checkpoints, and three, low tolerance for mistakes. So if you are not perfect in Square Up, say goodbye to your crown in the win. Now, it's been a long time since I've done this style of favorite level ranking, but maybe down the line, I will have a complete level ranking of all the levels in Fall Guys from LS1 to SS3, and then a separate ranking for only the SS4 rounds, because I cannot rank the SS4 rounds together with the rounds that were made in Unity concepts. That wouldn't be fair at all. Now, what inspired me to become a live streamer? So, in basic quick sense of essence, streamers like Pixels, Mosh, Adster, they've given me that idea of development that streaming wasn't going to be necessarily a bad thing. And from my own experience, when I did do my internship to understand about jobs when I would be a future grown-up adult, I realized that being an office job wasn't for me, and my body shape being very slim doesn't help if I were to do laborious intensive work. And I'm aware that like if you ever do internships or partnerships in your perhaps education and everything, if they send out to get some real life working experience, they don't want you ruin your experience as they want to tie it to something that you are already experienced with, but obviously that's not how the actual work life really is. I fully understood that from a long while ago. And personally, I knew that if I couldn't control my gaming habits during internship, there was no way I was going to be able to control it if I were to get a full-time job. So that basically inspired me to become a live streamer, and that's it. For those of you who are not aware, this upcoming Friday, the 5th of September morning, and for those in the Western Hemisphere, it would be the evening, the 4th of September. This will be my start of my streaming life as a live streamer. So please keep a lookout on that as well. Now, next question. When did I change or create my username? And how have I made it to be behind the knowledge of gWenWRXverse? So, to be honest, I will tell you is that I had zero clue when I changed my username. But I can give you an estimated time frame. It is when I already had this username by the time I started popping into Metaballs, another streamer that streams Fall Guys, but due to life, the streaming has obviously toned quite down. But regardless, that was when I first popped in with the username gWenWRXverse, and things just went from there. But the basic reasoning behind why it is gWenWRXverse is, I think, something that most of y'all would be much more interested behind. So, the change was like directly inspired from how the character portrayal was for Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But before I continue, I have zero clue how someone thought that Gwen Stacy was Gwenpool. Thank you very much in that one stream that I decided to pop in. And I look at character portrayal as one of the things I look at when I watch your movies. I don't see movies as like a place where people just simp and everything else just because there are female characters in it. And yes, I am aware that Across the Spider-Verse is an animated movie, which means that they don't have any character likeness and they only have voice actors. I understood that very much. Now, essentially, the character development in that movie was that Gwen Stacy was a lonely character, right? When she gained the powers of Spider-Man, or obviously Spider-Woman because she's a female, her obscurity to mask that hidden identity as Spider-Gwen basically distanced her from even her own friends and her own family, which made it lonely for her, right? And ever since after the loss of back then Peter Parker, who obviously if you have watched the movie, who decided to experiment on himself and turned himself into the lizard, and at that point in time, Spider-Gwen, not knowing who the lizard is under the hideous transformation, did a little too hard of a beat down on Peter, and that obviously inflicted some of the grievous wounds that were not anticipated at all. But I had a similar journey where I am much more of an isolated, introverted person. But obviously, I didn't have the same backstory like Gwen did, and I didn't lose a friend. However, I did sour relationships before, and maybe that's where I started to see some of these similarities. But obviously, eventually, Gwen decided to find inclusiveness in Spider Society in the society. Excuse me, in the Spider Society, where she found many much more like-minded beings in the other spiders, and eventually she realized that the rules of the Spider Society made it that much more complicated for her to live in. And like me, I found my inclusiveness in the community of Fall Guys. And that much being said, eventually Gwen Stacy had obviously the chance to start her own group, and which is going to lead into Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, which has yet to be released, but trust me, I'm definitely looking forward to that. And obviously, this inclusiveness taught me much more values and everything, and I had since started to try and socialize with more friends and everything. And let's just say that even until today, I still only have like one or two friends that I still didn't really talk to nowadays because life takes a change. And let's just say I'm trying to find new friends, whether be it through games and finding some common ground that we share. Then, for those of you who wonder, the WRX part, that is not inspired from a car brand, which I did not realize until Pixels decided to make a thumbnail because of WRX being a car brand. Then I won a tournament of his when he did Fall Guys, but that's beside the point. The part of WRX did actually come from a tuition teacher back when I obviously still studied when I was like 10, and it kind of stuck with me ever since. So, but of course, for those of you who are new to my channel, you can call me Gwen, you can call me WRX. I don't really mind, even if you want to combine it, like for some other streamers who start to call me Gwen WRX to differentiate from some of the others who might have Gwen in their username. That is totally fine. I have zero issue with it. And obviously, because I chose this type of username for myself, if you guys misgender me for like a few times, I'm not going to be that harsh on you. Okay, so do not worry. Be afraid to make the type of mistakes that no one can blame you for. I have zero issues with it. Alright, next question. What games did I play before Fall Guys? So, I'll be honest, I am really a gamer from all intensive purposes. So, there will be lots of games that you guys may not have heard of. So, first, I kind of started with Dynasty Warriors 4, a hack and slash game depicting the gameplay of the Three Kingdoms period in China and everything else in the early 80s. So you're talking about 185, around that time period, all the way to 267, I think. It's around that amount of time period. But of course, that wasn't like something that I'm going to dwell into too much today. Then I also tried myself in Left 4 Dead, a zombie shooter survival game in the both versions of 1 and 2, particularly playing not just the campaign but even multiplayer, where I already learned to interact online, but not as much as I am aware of now. as well as this is not the topic for this discussion. And for those of you who are interested on whether I do play mobile games, I definitely do, because I have also played games like Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Call of Duty Mobile, let's just say even WWE Supercard, and much more games. So I really have a wide range of games that I play. And there's one game that I will talk about in an upcoming question, as someone actually asked this question, and I did have to think of a second route if ever I stopped any aspirations for the game that I still play even actively today and even before Fall Guys. And obviously that led me here as a streamer. Now, how do I motivate myself when I don't want to play games? Now, as mentioned, this question is definitely tough for me because of my position as a gamer. As I just have like so many games to play, right? Like, even if you ask me at the top of my head right now, I have about, let's just say, 20 mobile games that I have downloaded on my phone, but obviously I don't play them every day. And when I have no motivation to play a game, I think to me it's just like it's time for me to take a break and I just swap to another game. But maybe this will change once I do start the streaming life, as I do believe that burnout is real, like the lack of motivation is just there. But let's just see whether my stance on this changes eventually. Whoops, I totally forgot to actually show you guys the answer, but there you go. So, next question. Thanks, Rafi, for this question. Can you be released from my basement? Well, for one thing, I don't exactly live in a landed property, so I don't actually own a basement. But if I did own a basement, I would just say, please enjoy your free time outside of my basement during the day. Just remember to return to my basement to haunt me in my dreams at night. Now, this next question is for those of you who left a question who have probably seen this. Whoever asked this question basically put this in caps. Why do I unadd people from the Epic Games friend list? This is a very simple answer. So this basically happened when I started to stream Fortnite through my mobile, and that's it. I do at times want to enjoy a game by myself. And the in-game interface of Fortnite doesn't allow players to turn on Do Not Disturb. And I was just basically in the end saying that if you guys only want to keep playing with others, some people might not be for you, as some people do know how to find comfort in playing alone. That is all I got to say. In this world, adaptation is very important, and I do keep forgetting to show you all these things, as I do actually look at a second screen, as time is a little tight for me. But regardless, I'll try and speed through all this. Now, what are my top 5 streamers, or top 10, as I did not update the question when I did it, that I watch the most, in no particular order, although for some of you might be able to see some of the ranking order. So, obviously in no particular order, the 10 streamers that I watch, I'm not even gonna say the number ranking, otherwise it just sounds like a ranking in general. So I have Adster, Marsh, Pixels, Mooney, Aussie Girl, ABC, Died Angel, DMG Phonics, O'Will, and Bry the Gamer Guy. All these streams is most of the time that I usually kind of look in there, so you would see me one way or another even if I don't chat as much. Now, thoughts on the Line Moon as a random user? I'll admit this isn't really a question, but since you asked it, I'll answer. That is the rule of Q&A. To be honest, I think that you're just a viewer who supports streamers, particularly those that plays Fall Guys, and at times, obviously, when you enjoy how the streamer presents themselves, you support them in other streams. But as a viewer who joins up in streams, I do notice that you try and enforce all the rules that has been laid out in the community. So you don't like say try to make yourself stand out, and the only times that you do stand out is when you win in Fall Guys. That is a different type of standing out. But now, the big question. What is my dream? I forgot to put a animation for this, but regardless. First off, thank you to whoever asked this question, because this is the sort of things that I like to see on Q&As. Because without asking this type of question, who would you know if the streamer is for you or not? So, in essence, I'll quickly describe this thing. Somewhere in the 2019 to 2020 year period, I picked up on a game in 2017, mind you, not in 2019 or 2020. I picked up Mobile Legends as a mobile game to play. And after seeing how Singapore basically kind of performs and everything, no hate to all the Singaporean pro players out there. I feel that you guys are definitely out there, but obviously there are other countries that are much more better than us, right? And I had a aspiration to be a professional player. Obviously, going professional in esports is very difficult. So sometime in 2024, I worry that I might not be able to commit to that aspiration, as one thing, I still haven't found a solid team to be in. And second, my own skills, I admit, is not at the peak. So most definitely there will be some issues going on with that. And obviously understanding that I will not be able to dictate my own pace in an office job, I've slightly dwelt to the evolution that I have to swap around and perhaps try my hand at streaming, thanks to Pixels, Bosch, Adster, who gave me the idea that as a streamer, you are there to entertain your audience. And I've started to realize that I can actually do something like that while detecting my own pace, my own time, so to speak. And as well, esports careers in this world don't really last long, and most of the professional players, whether you are saying like in other countries or anything, sort of step down and they focus on content creation as a streamer and whatever else. So I forged a second path in streaming where I believe that I retire from the first or unable to commit to my first aspiration. Now, announcement time. I'll make this very, very short. So, I have two announcements to share with all of you. The first of the announcements is that I made a very slight big mistake in my schedule, and I have since obviously updated this in my channel description, where in a week I can only stream either only 4 or 5 days compared to my original description where I can stream either 5 or 6 days. So my goal of being able to stream only 4 or 5 days is based on my family's work schedule. That much is guaranteed to all of you. And because of the change from this angle, In day 5, I originally only had WWE 2K25 where I create a custom character in the game, which I obviously already have, and I am going to fight against the entire roster on legendary difficulty. One by one, who is my opponent, it always is randomized. But obviously, when I successfully defeat them, they will be removed from the list. But that said, I have to also plan times where my original day 6 plan, where I would actually include a single player game. So that has been now shifted to day 5. My day 1 to day 4 streams have been unaffected. But for day 6, the single player game now combined into day 5. I do hope to actually alternate the weeks in terms of when I play W2K25 and when I do play my single player game. So that is all for the first announcement. And the second announcement, which I think some of y'all might have called me out on it already as to why you can't see my messages on live chat. So my response to this is very simple. So sometime after a very famous incident, I would not make reference to it over in my this Q&A video in the announcements, but I did decide to block 2 individuals. Initially it was only 1, but only recently have I decided to block the second. Now, my decision on this will be only temporary, sorry. But if you decided to provoke me or any other surrounding communities even further, that action will be permanent. I will be unbanning the first individual. In fact, no, I will make it such that I unblock both individuals from my channel. And again, if you show signs of immaturity, whoever you are, new or existing viewer, at any point in time, you will be subject to a first 24-hour timeout, or second, a ban outright from the channel. Who are these 2 individuals? I will not even make reference to them, but that is all I got to say. Thank you for listening in to my Q&A session and even the 2 announcements at the end, and I hope to see you next time. Adios.